Arsenal and Liverpool played out a 2-2 draw at Emirates Stadium, but from our perspective, is this a good point or a bad point? Were we on the wrong end of some bad refereeing decisions? Again, did we retreat into defense mode too early? How good is Bukayo Saka? And more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. With me, Harry Symeou. Don't go anywhere. Hey everybody, how are you? Happy Monday. I hope you've all recovered from what was a very emotionally draining afternoon at Emirates Stadium yesterday. I came away from that game feeling completely and utterly exhausted. My day started off really badly from a work perspective, and I wondered if that was going to be a sign of things to come, or if I'd got all the bad luck out of the way and actually the game was going to go really well. And in the end, it was kind of somewhere in between. Look, I think this is a really difficult game to unpack. Stephen says in the chat, "Morning, Harry. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Difficult one to pick the bones out of." And I think it is. And I think the reason it's a difficult game to pick the bones out of is because you've got to be able to differentiate, which isn't always easy, between what we saw and how the game went and what we feel. When you are leading a game against a title rival by 2-1 going into the last 10 minutes and you don't win it, you're going to feel disappointment. You're going to feel deflated. You're going to feel underwhelmed. That is only natural. But I think it's a lot more complex than that. And that's why I didn't want to record this last night. Now, for those of you that are Patreons, you can access the match day reaction where I shared my initial thoughts on the 2-2 draw. You can check that out. There's also an In Focus episode that was released yesterday with a focus on Riccardo Calafiori, so you can go over and check that out. You'd also be supporting the podcast as well, which I'd really appreciate. It's not obligatory, but if you want access to extra content, head over there, patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. It really does help. But yeah, I did get home at a decent hour last night from the game. I think by the time I wrapped up my media duties and made my way home, I think it was probably about 8 o'clock. Yeah, just after 8 p.m. And I did toy with the idea of sitting down and recording the podcast then. And I did think about going live. And then I thought to myself, no, because I'm not going to do this game justice. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to be downbeat and I'm going to be frustrated. And yeah, it's going to come across a little bit too negatively. And I don't think that's what our performance on the day deserved or warranted. So I decided to leave it, to sleep on it. And here I am this morning, I think, with a much calmer head and with a much clearer view of what happened against Liverpool yesterday. So we're going to get into all of that on this edition of the podcast. I do want to say some hellos and read out some of your comments as we make our way through the show as well. Big hello to Derek, who's joining us from Australia. Angela's joining us from Australia too. We've got Pisa joining us from Malaysia. Stevens there, Django Jr., Gunnar, Halo, Andrew B. Says, "I know it's easy to say, especially when Liverpool have the likes of Trent, Salah, etc., but not sure why we sat off. I beg your pardon. Not sure why we sat off to that extent in the second half. I think we were winning the midfield battle and should have kept on the pressure." Big hello to James. Big hello to Mohamed, who's joining us as well. We've got DS Electronics, who says, "Morning, Harry," in the chat. Junior Gunner says, well, in answer to my question, good point or bad point, he says, "Bad point, all things considered, but we shouldn't let the questionable officiating distract us from what was a terrible second-half performance. We weren't moaning about the refs when we went 16 out of 18 last season." Angela's taken issue with me saying it was an exhausting game. She says, "Try watching the game at 2:30 to 4:30 a.m., then getting a few hours sleep before you start your day." Hey, I'm not claiming that I've got it worse than you guys. I just felt like emotionally I was at zero by the time I got home because those kind of games, they're really taxing, aren't they? They're really difficult to kind of come down from afterwards. But anyway, let's get into it then. We'll start with the team news. Going into the game, there was a lot of concern around the fitness, around the availability of some real key players. Riccardo Calafiori was one that we were hoping may have an outside chance of featuring. I did say to you guys that I thought it was very unlikely. And Mikel Arteta confirmed to me after the game. I beg your pardon. All the sneezing's come. I've been fine all morning, but of course I start the podcast and it comes. Mikel Arteta did confirm to me after the game in the radio interview that Calafiori is going to be out for a few weeks, which is obviously not very good news. But what was good news was that we had Bukayo Saka back and we had Jurrien Timber back. And those two were really, really important. I thought for the entire duration that Timber was on the pitch, Mo Salah was very, very quiet as a result of Timber doing such a great job on him. And Bukayo Saka obviously opened the scoring and showed everybody what a devastating force he can be and what we've been missing essentially over the last couple of games without him. He is so, so important. When we're without him, there will be, I beg your pardon, a drop-off. I don't know what's going on. I'm sneezing like a madman. I haven't sneezed all day. Maybe there's something in here. I don't know. Anyway, so both of those players really, really important, and it was great to have them back in the starting lineup. We also saw Mikel Merino start in the midfield alongside Declan Rice. We had Thomas Partey at right back, which was the one thing I was maybe a bit worried about, I got to be honest, going into the game. But we'll come on to talk about his performance later because I thought it was very, very outstanding. It was very, very good from Thomas Partey. So that was my only one concern. I wondered how Ben White was going to get on at centre-back. He hasn't looked at his best in recent weeks, even at right-back, a position that he's been playing very, very regularly. But I thought he stepped up yesterday when we needed him and did an excellent job, a really, really good job of marshalling that backline, particularly after Gabriel went off and he was essentially left with someone who there are, to put it politely, question marks over. The Bukayo Saka goal that opened the scoring after 9 minutes was just brilliant in every sense of the word. Ben White, who has that existing relationship, doesn't he, with Bukayo Saka, because they play right back and right wing together, who understands his movements, who knows him inside out. His first instinct when he got on the ball was to look up and identify Saka's position. Once he does that, he drops the ball over the top of Andrew Robertson exquisitely. Bukayo Saka was brilliant in the way that he took it, in the way that he checked back inside, and in the way that he just rifled it past Kevin Kelleher at his near post, who had absolutely zero chance of keeping that out. But you got to give Ben White his flowers here. All the headlines will have been grabbed by Bukayo Saka, and rightly so, because that was an excellent piece of play. He was the story, out for a while, back in the side, touch and go whether he was going to make it. He did, and he has an impact after just 9 minutes. But don't take anything away from Ben White. Just an unreal pass from him. And then 9 minutes after that, we concede the sloppiest of equalizers, in my opinion. Because we're a side that pride ourselves on set pieces. Whether that be offensively or defensively, we are a side that normally work those situations really, really well. We have the tools in place to defend those scenarios. And on this occasion, we were caught out by a flick on at the near post. And it's not always easy to deal with that because you don't know where the run's coming from. You know, you don't know who they're going to use to try and win the flick on. I mean, I wouldn't have looked at Luis Diaz and said he's the guy that we have to be most concerned about from this set piece. But obviously he gets across the front post and he flicks it on, and then it goes to Virgil van Dijk. And I always feel for defenders. I got sympathy for defenders when they are dealing with that type of set piece routine, because you set yourself as a centre-half, as a defender, to deal with a ball coming from a certain angle, right? So you position yourself accordingly, you get into the right spaces, you protect all the right areas as far as you're concerned. And then a flick on means that there's a deviation in the direction of the ball, meaning that actually your initial position may now be invalid. And your position now might put you in trouble, whereas from the initial angle, actually it was right. So you have to have sympathy, I think, for defenders in that scenario, in that situation. Unfortunately, we paid for it because Virgil van Dijk was the quickest to react. He was the right side of Thomas Partey as far as he was concerned, and he was able to just bundle the ball in from close range and level the score. What, again, I really, really enjoyed, and it's become a real common theme at Emirates Stadium now, is that the fans did their bit as soon as that goal went in to kind of make it known to the players that we were with them. We were on their side. Everybody got up, started cheering for the Arsenal again. There wasn't that, that deflation that comes across or has come across in previous years. There was a willingness from everybody to get up and say, come on, we got this. Let's go again. We started the game really well. Let's go again. And that we did, because the remainder of our first half performance was outstanding. That's as well, I would say, as Arsenal have played all season. We were quick to everything. We won all our duels. We were first to every loose ball. We were stronger in the challenge. We completely dominated in the midfield during that period of time. And as half-time was approaching, I was starting to worry that we weren't going to make that count. But thankfully, we found the goal just a couple of minutes before the break, a free kick from Declan Rice. And we'd had 3 or 4 of those free kicks from very similar positions going into that point, and we hadn't really made the most of them. Clearly, going with the outswinger was something that Arsenal had practiced. It was something that Arsenal identified as a way of potentially hurting Liverpool because they kept doing the same thing. Declan Rice was, on a couple of occasions, asking Nicolas Jova, do you want me on this, or do you want the left footer who can swing it into the box? And Nicolas Jova said, no, you, Declan, you're the one. So clearly Arsenal felt there was some value in the outswinger, and right on the stroke of half-time, we reaped the rewards of that when Mikel Merino powered home a header to put Arsenal in front. And we'll talk about Merino's performance a little bit later on, but it felt to me like this was the time that Mikel Merino actually announced himself as an Arsenal player. I've been a bit underwhelmed by him, I got to be honest, since he's arrived. I don't think he's shown enough, generally speaking, to warrant the money we paid for him, but B, the long pursuit that it took eventually to land him. So I'm kind of in a place where, I was a little bit underwhelmed, but I felt like yesterday Mikel Merino, after a sloppy 15 minutes at the start of the game, he made his mark on this Arsenal team. So we'll talk about him in depth a little bit later on. But the other big moment in that second half, that first half, I beg your pardon, was the penalty appeal for what looked like it might have been a foul on Gabriel Martinelli. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. Watching it in the stadium, live, in real time, I thought penalty. I thought he's gone completely through him. And it's impossible, given the way that he's gone through him, that Ibu Konate got the ball there. I then saw a replay on the monitor in front of me, which highlighted that Konate did get a touch on the ball. But the problem here is this is where angles can be deceiving, because there's one angle that I've seen going around on social media where it looks like he's gone through Martinelli and then touched the ball. And there's another angle that we were shown inside the stadium that I think you'll find if you go and watch Match of the Day or watch the game back on Sky Sports, rather than just going by this social media clip. The point I'm trying to make is that wasn't the most frustrating decision of the afternoon for me. I'll come on to reveal what was and what really, excuse my language, pissed me off. But with that one, it's strong. It's one of those challenges where you take everything. As long as you take the ball, I guess that's okay. There was an argument that Martinelli handled it in that scenario as well. So I'm kind of okay with that not being given as a penalty based on what I saw at that point in the stadium. And I've watched it back, and my conclusion is that the two different angles that are going around show quite different things. And this is where you got to be wary of camera angles and wary of how things are portrayed. I know a lot of people will disagree with that. I know a lot of people will say, no, it's a stonewall penalty. I think he could have easily given it because of the nature of the challenge. We talk about recklessness. We talk about endangering an opponent. If you go through him like a steam train, I guess you are doing that. But it isn't a scandal. So I'm not going to sit here and bang on about that for a large portion of the pod. I don't think it's worth it. But we go in at half-time and I'm buzzing. I'm over the moon. Best performance of the season so far at that point. and we are leading a game. We'd already been pegged back once. We managed to overcome that setback and get our noses back in front. And we had what we deserved at halftime as far as I was concerned, which was a lead. Then the second half starts. And you start to think about how much longer Bukayo Saka and Jurrien Timber have left in the tank. They've both been out. They've both been injured. They were both touch and go for this game. Mikel Arteta told me after the game, when I asked him how late he made that decision to start them, that it was a decision that was taken on Saturday night. So that's how late Arsenal left it to make a decision. That's how late in the day it was decided that those two were ready to start. Mikel told me that both players had contacted him and said that they were ready. And that obviously played a big part in his decision. And they were ready, to be fair, because from the start, they were both outstanding. But you did wonder how long they were going to last. And as the game went on, it became abundantly clear that Bukayo Saka's threat diminished. He was excellent in the first half, but in the second, his legs went a little bit, which is understandable, but that was the reality. And as the game went on, you started to see Jurrien Timber struggle as well. There was one sprint that he had with Mo Salah in the second half. I don't know if you remember it, where Salah sort of flicks it round the corner and then chases this ball. And Timber is really, really struggling to keep up with him. And that was the first time in the game that I looked at Jurrien Timber and I thought, yeah, you're in trouble here. And then he went down with cramp and then he got back up. And then a few minutes later, he went down with cramp again. And we lost those two players. And that damaged us. There's no doubt about that. That damaged us in the game. Maybe not quite as much, though, as the loss of Gabriel, Big Gabby, who went down under a challenge from Darwin Núñez. And there was a bit of contact with what looked like the kind of back of Gabriel's knee, which he was struggling to recover from. He couldn't shake it off. You know, it was ironic because the Liverpool bench in front of me and some of the people in the press box of a Liverpool persuasion were giving it the old, oh, look at Gabriel. He's faking it to run down the clock. Dark Arts FC, all of that, blah, blah, blah. But the guy was genuinely injured. He tried to continue. He couldn't. He went off. Kiwior came on. And I think with Jakub Kiwior, right, there's a school of thought that he's not quite Arsenal level, you know, touch and go whether he's good enough to be a squad player, but generally we all accept that there's quite a big drop-off between him and Gabriel and Saliba. I think Gabriel and Saliba, guys, are the best centre-halves in the world. I think that pairing is the best pairing in world football. So I think it's perfectly natural that when you lose one of them, your team is weaker. And not only did we lose William Saliba in the lead up to this game because he was suspended somewhat unfairly, in my opinion, and even more so when you look at the one that Van der Ven got away with in the Spurs-Palace game yesterday. But we then lose Big Gabby during the game as well, which leaves us with a real makeshift backline. That was a huge moment in the second half when Jakub Kiwior came on. Now, Jakub Kiwior didn't actually play badly in isolation, but he's not Gabriel. He doesn't give you that reassurance that Gabriel does. And then we lose Timber and we have to bring on young Miles Lewis-Skelly. The backline becomes even more makeshift and it becomes even more of a problem for us. And then not only do you have an 18-year-old who's been brought up as a midfielder playing at left back against Mo Salah for the remainder of the game, but you don't have the brilliant Gabriel Magalhaes next to him to kind of babysit him a little bit, to look after him, to protect him in the way that he's protected many of fullbacks in recent times, the likes of Alexander Zinchenko, Jakub Kiwior at times, and various others, etc., etc. So we ended up in a situation where, yeah, it was always going to be difficult. And am I surprised that we conceded the equalizer? No, not really. Am I disappointed by the nature of the equalizer? Absolutely. And I'm just sort of watching it back now so I can talk you through what I think went wrong for that. That's the Merino goal. Bear with me a second. I'm just scrolling through this because we were on the attack. We were on the counter-attack. We played a ball forward that was looking for Gabriel Martinelli. We lost possession. Liverpool come away with it. And then you've got a situation where our makeshift backline of Partey on the far side is in position. You've got Ben White coming across with Darwin Núñez, and you've got Kiwior who's trying to cover the fact that Mo Salah has got in behind Miles Lewis-Skelly. And Kivior maybe just doesn't react quickly enough. He doesn't step up quickly enough. And as I watch it, and then the ball is played by Trent Alexander-Arnold in behind the Arsenal defence, because Kivior hasn't stepped up, partly because he's worried about Lewis Skelly's position, Mo Salah, who's in an offside position, has the freedom of the pitch. As this develops, it doesn't actually go to Mo Salah. The ball has a great angle on it. It's a great pass from Trent Alexander-Arnold. And Darwin Núñez then charges into the box. Salah diverts in midfield. Lewis Skelly's too far away from him to track the run. And when the cutback happens from Núñez, Salah from pretty much the penalty spot just side foots it into the far corner. And Liverpool have their equalizer. They are a team with that level of quality within their ranks. So you have to be flawless defensively. You have to be at the top of your game defensively. You cannot switch off for a second. And we gave the ball away and we didn't revert back to our defensive shape quick enough. Kivior could have done more. Lewis Skelly could have done more, in my opinion. So I don't want to sit here and say it was 18-year-old Miles Lewis Skelly's fault. And I don't want to sit here and say it was all Jakub Kivior's fault. You can look at Martinelli, who gave the ball away at the other end of the pitch and really ought to have done better with Skelly's pass. You can look at the left back. You can look at the centre back. It was a consequence of our left side being significantly weakened because we lost Gabriel and we lost Timber. And that's the way to look at this. You don't need to dig out an individual. It's a consequence of us having a really weakened left side because we were falling apart in terms of personnel, in terms of fitness, etc., etc. Then we get to the final stages of the game in stoppage time, and Arsenal have a goal ruled out. This is a decision that I took issue with way more than the penalty shout that we had in the first half. And there's another decision that I took even more of an issue with, which probably isn't as significant or impactful on how the game ended, but really did wind me up. So let's talk about that goal that was ruled out, essentially. There's a challenge made by Jakub Kivior. It's an aerial challenge where he wins a header and he heads it forward to Kai Havertz. He heads it forward to Kai Havertz, who, with the kind of top of his arm bordering on shoulder, sort of knocks it up into the air over the defender, turns, gets on the end of it, round the other side, lifts it over the goalkeeper, it comes off the post, and when it bounces down on the ground, Jesus follows it up and puts it in the back of the net. Anthony Taylor's pulled that back because he's already claiming there was a foul committed by Jakub Kivior. Now, I'm not saying that it definitely wasn't a foul, because I think it depends on your interpretation. But what Anthony Taylor has to do as a, and I quote, top-level referee, is let that develop and see what happens. Let that develop and then decide. Because what he does is he claims that he'd already blown the whistle. You can see him mouthing, I've already pulled the play up. But the delay between that Kivior challenge and him blowing the whistle, if you watch the replay back carefully, is too long. Too long. If it's a blatant foul in your eyes and you've already seen it, blow up straight away, but he doesn't. He gets into this awkward in-between stage before blowing. And that's what really, really frustrates me, because your get-out-of-jail-free card when everyone's protesting about it is, nope, I already called that before. If you'd already blown the whistle, mate, no problem. But you didn't. You delayed. You delayed it way too long. And ultimately, guys, what has Jakub Kivior done wrong there, other than getting up first, getting up early, and winning the offensive header? He's just been a bit more aggressive. The guy that he challenges doesn't even go down onto the ground. So it isn't with that much force. It's just an aggressive leap from Kivior. He's timed it brilliantly. He's got up above his man nice and quickly. And when you get above your man in that way, it's very likely and it's very common that the defender then can't get up off the ground themselves. That's the benefit of timing your jump right. Remember last season when we were told that the foul on Gabriel at Newcastle wasn't a foul? Well, it was. This was half the force of that. But if that's not a foul, how the hell can this be? And that's my issue. That's my issue with this one. He doesn't allow the play to develop. Maybe the VAR would have said Kai Havertz used the top of his arm to bring that under control, and maybe they'd have ruled it out anyway. Who knows? But it's the way that it was refereed, the fact that he was so quick to stop the game without really watching it develop and without seeing if anything was to come of it, and then using the technology that he has at his disposal to try and come to a more accurate decision. But funnily enough, even though that would have been a winning goal for Arsenal, the thing that pissed me off most yesterday was when we forced the corner deep into stoppage time through Gabriel Jesus. And somehow, with Anthony Taylor in close proximity, with the linesman there on that side, it wasn't given. That really, really, really annoyed me. Like, really annoyed me. So, yeah, that's enough about refereeing. I want to talk a little bit about whether or not we retreated too early. That seems to be a common consensus at the moment. Are we too negative, etc.? We did a pod on that, didn't we, the other day? We talked about it. So we'll get into that in just a second. I do want to take some of your comments from the live chat. But before I do that, I'd like you guys, if you could, to please leave a like on the video. There's so many of you watching. There's hundreds of you with us live right now, but we've only got 46 likes on the board for some reason. That is not acceptable, guys. Come on. I want to get to a couple of hundred likes by the time the stream ends, at least. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna, where you'll get access to more content as well as supporting the podcast. You'll have access to my match day reaction, which was my thoughts maybe 15 minutes after the full-time whistle yesterday, where it was a little bit more raw, a little bit more emotional. Check that out. Also, you'll have access to our In Focus series, which focuses on players, topics, etc., etc. And yesterday's episode was a look at Ricardo Calafiori, what he's brought to this Arsenal side, and how we expect him to develop, the consequences of him being in the team, both good and bad. And yeah, check it out. Patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. Right. I'm going to take some of your comments, and then I'll talk about the comments around us maybe retreating too early. Keep your comments coming. I'd love to hear from you. Andrew J54 says the loss to Bournemouth has put immense pressure on the team. Not good enough. Mario says we're still in touch. The team are immense, and it may well spark our campaign into life. Ben White deserves a whole bouquet of flowers after that performance. Absolutely. We're going to do individual performances a little bit later on in the pod. Don't worry, because there's a few that I want to really go into. There's a few players that I do think deserve bouquets of flowers, as you put it. Junior Gunner says, how can you win a league when only 1/3 of your front line consistently produce? I think it's incredibly harsh to say that Kai Havertz doesn't produce when he's our top scorer. What else have we got? G. Weber says, Nunez got away with murder, barges Saka no foul and clattered Gabby on purpose, nearly gave him a bad knee injury. I'll tell you who did get away with murder, Luis Diaz. How he stayed out of the book was just incredible to me. The amount of times he delayed restarts. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot. Only Arsenal players get done for delaying restarts. But yeah, he was really frustrating. Angela T highlighting the incident in the first half. Do you know what? I'd completely forgotten about this, where Virgil van Dijk sort of kicked out at Kai Havertz a couple of times, just because Kai Havertz got on his nerves and dared to challenge him from the ball. Remember, Virgil van Dijk's got the aura, guys. Nobody's allowed to go anywhere near him. If you do, he will kick you and go unpunished. But yeah, anyway. What else have we got? Afsar says Arteta's game management and substitutions is poor. Why did Trossard stay on for 90 minutes and no Ethan Nwaneri? Look, I thought his game management against Bournemouth was poor. I did, and I said that. And I reviewed that game, I think, quite critically after it. But I don't think that was the case yesterday. I don't think you can pin this on Mikel Arteta. He's had to make changes because his players were dropping like flies. Not only was it a makeshift backline to begin with, and a backline that contained defenders who weren't at their peak condition, a centre midfielder at right back, and a right back at left back who has been out for a while and clearly wasn't going to last the entire minutes. He had to make changes. What I think was a kind of damning indictment of one player in particular, though, and I'm not saying I wanted to see him come on in this game, by the way, because we've seen him go up against Mo Salah before and we all know how that goes. But I think it's a real damning indictment of how Mikel Arteta now views Alexander Zinchenko, that he turned to Miles Lewis Skelly rather than the Ukrainian who's won multiple Premier League titles in a situation of great need. I mean, you could look at it two ways, because I saw it as a damning indictment of Alexander Zinchenko. And when I was speaking to one of my colleagues yesterday, he said, yeah, but you could look at it through the other lens, and it's a great point, which is maybe Miles Lewis-Skelly has impressed that much that he felt that he deserved it over Zinchenko, rather than it being about Zinchenko's level massively declining. Zinchenko hasn't played a lot of football recently as well. Maybe that was a part of the decision too, but I just think it says a lot, doesn't it, when you've got that experienced campaigner who's been there and done it in the biggest of games, sitting there and you opt to bring on an 18-year-old who isn't just inexperienced, but isn't really a left-back either. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was really, really interesting. Big thank you to Steve for your kind words in the chat, mate. Really, really appreciate it. Someone asked if I'm going to be on 90 Min. I am going to be on 90 Min from about 11 o'clock. We're doing it remotely today just because of some scheduling issues for a lot of us. But there will be a show at around about 11 a.m. live on the channel this morning. Okay, let's take then a couple more of your comments before I go into what I want to say to kind of wrap up. Steve Anderton says, where does the result leave us for the league? So this was one of the points that I wanted to round up on, but as you asked the question, we'll do this now because I think this is really, really important. I think that when you're in title races with Manchester City in particular, for a couple of years, you become conditioned to believe that any drop points are going to be fatal. And a lot of the time that's the case because they're that bloody good. Right now, we're in third place. We're on 18 points. And we're 5 points off of Manchester City at the top of the league. Now, the way I look at this is essentially it's 2 points. Because if we want to win the league, I think we've got to beat them at Emirates Stadium. So I look at that as a 2-point gap. With Liverpool, I look at it as a 4-point gap because they've been to our place already. But the thing is with Liverpool is that I don't think they're as good as Manchester City. Based on the evidence I saw yesterday, I don't think they're as good as people have cracked them out to be. I think they're a decent side, and I think they show great character to come back from behind twice. But there were large periods in that game where Arsenal were comfortably the better team. And even in the second half, when people are talking about how much better Liverpool were and how much worse we were, I don't think they created an awful lot to shout about. So I'm now confident when I say that Liverpool aren't quite as good as us and Manchester City overall, generally speaking. When you consider the fixtures that we've had, the players that we've been without, actually to still be within touching distance is kind of not something to be pleased about, but it's something that you should be maybe content with, I think, at this point. Think about the games we played. We've been to Manchester City, which is why I don't look at their lead over us as a 5-point lead. I look at it as a 2-point lead because they've got to come to us. And essentially, if you want to win the league, I think you need to win that game. But we've been to City, we've been to Spurs, we've been to Villa, who are hot on our heels, by the way. They're only behind us on goal difference. And we played one of the title rivals in Liverpool. 4 of our 9 games so far have been against sides that at the absolute minimum are Champions League contenders and at best are title contenders. 2 of those teams are title contenders. If you want to put Villa in there, then it's 3 of those teams are title contenders. So at this stage of the season, given the way that the fixtures were done, it was always going to be that the table was probably going to look lopsided against us. And over time, hopefully, we can make it look a bit more even when the fixtures are kinder to us and less kind to those that we're in pursuit of. That's how you got to look at it. It's a 38-game season. You can't panic at this stage. You can't panic 9 games in. That's how you got to look at this. That's how I'm looking at this. Some people will say I'm being too positive. Toxic positive is something I've been accused of in the past. I don't even know what that is. But you got to think about the situation we're in. And that brings me on nicely to the next point, which is about whether or not I think Arsenal retreated too early. I don't think there was any intention from Arsenal to retreat in that second half. I don't think there was any intention from Arsenal to slump back into that defensive shape, to let Liverpool have all of the ball. I think that our attacking threat diminished because the fitness of a key player was nowhere near where it should be. I'm grateful that he fought through and made the game and had an impact on the game in the way he did, but we all know that he wasn't at the level that we know he's capable of in terms of sustaining that level for a longer period of time. When you go into the game with just one of your regular centre-back pairing, a player who was a centre-back once upon a time, but very rarely plays there now, has to change his habits and tuck in alongside him. When you've got to move one of your best midfielders into the right-back position, and then you've got to play a half-fit left-back, you're always starting the game on fragile ground. And as the game went on, it got worse. You had the injury to Gabriel, massive blow. Don't underestimate the impact of that. Then you lose Jury and Timber, and all of a sudden your left side is very, very weak. Therefore, is it not natural that you would drop off a few yards? Is it not natural that you would try and limit the spaces that you're leaving? Is it not natural that you're wary of your defensive strength at that point, and so you go into that mode? I don't think Mikel Arteta was standing on the touchline saying, guys, sit back, don't get on the ball. Don't try and dictate the game. Don't try and dictate the tempo. Don't try and have possession. Sit back and defend, because we're boring Arsenal, and that's what we do now. That was definitely not the message coming across from the manager. This was something that happened naturally due to what I can describe as a decline in resource available to us, if that makes sense. Like, that's how I saw that. So on that point, I think it was something that was going to happen because of the personnel changes that we were forced into. In terms of some individual performances then, before I take a few questions, let's talk Bukayo Saka first and foremost. I know we touched on it a little bit earlier on in the pod, but I just want to talk about how important he is to this Arsenal team. My God, he is so important. Devastating finisher, devastating dribbler, very, very strong, very, very powerful. For someone of that build, it's incredible, really, isn't it? He's just an unbelievable player, and yesterday just kind of highlighted what we'd been missing recently in terms of packing that punch in attack. We're still without Martin Odegaard as well, and when the two of them are back, Arsenal will look like a totally different team. We all know that. I think we all believe that, most of us anyway. But again, for those that said that at Bournemouth, we shouldn't have missed him and that we shouldn't have been bemoaning the fact that he was unavailable, he turned up and he showed you exactly what we were missing. And he justified, I think, those that were saying, well, of course we were going to lack a bit going forward because we were without our best forward player. So Bukayo Saka's impact, really, really key. And he's just a top player, isn't he? I want to give some flowers, a virtual bouquet of flowers to Arsenal's Thomas Partey, who I thought was unreal yesterday at right back. I don't think he put a foot wrong. I think he looked fitter than he has all season. I think he looked sharper than he has all season. I think he handled Luis Diaz brilliantly. I think he wriggled away from him once. I thought his passing out from right back was superb. I thought his drifting into midfield at times in the first half was brilliant in terms of he seemed to find the right balance of when to go, when not to go, when to be wary of Diaz, and when to say, nope, screw it, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do what I'm expected to do as an inverting fullback. I just thought Thomas Partey's performance was, as Angela puts it in the chat, immense. Junior Gunner says it was his best game all season. I agree with that. And I hold my hands up. Because I've said in the early stages of this season that I'm worried about him. I've said that I don't know if he is still able to cut it at the top level. You still go into every game worrying about him fitness-wise, and there have been games where he's looked sluggish and slow and nowhere near the physical level that we need him to be this season. But guess what? Yesterday, he was bloody brilliant, and he deserves his praise and flowers for that. So, Thomas Partey, fantastic. Ben White, I thought, was excellent as well. And the reason I'm so pleased with what Ben White did, and I know people will say, well, he was a centre-back, wasn't he? And he did play there with Gabriel for a period of time, so there should be that understanding, there should be that connection already there. It's not easy when you've developed a habit of playing at right-back, and your positioning is always based on that. And the spaces, you learn them inside out, and you have your markers on the pitch and all of that stuff. To then switch to centre-back is not easy, particularly when you haven't got a natural right-back next to you, particularly when in the latter stages of the game you've got a left-back a left centre-back, who's probably a little bit short of confidence. So you got to give Ben White immense credit for the defensive display that he put in yesterday, but also the assist for the Bukayo Saka goal, just sensational. And the final individual that I want to highlight is Mikel Merino. This felt like the day that he announced himself as an Arsenal player. He had a sloppy 15 minutes, I would say. He gave the ball away, didn't he, where he let it run under his foot and Mo Salah got the shot off. But after that, he was winning duels. He was brilliant on the ball, just doing things simple, getting the ball, getting it out of his feet, working it out to that left flank nice and early, trying to create those 1v1s for Martinelli. And obviously he steps up and contributes with a big goal in a big game. And, you know, that is the kind of moment I think you need as a new arrival when maybe the jury's out, to kind of build that connection with the supporters. And I certainly enjoyed his performance yesterday. So good to see Mikel Merino arriving and showing us what obviously Mikel Arteta has seen, because I've got to be honest, I've been questioning that one a little bit, just because it hasn't really worked in the way that that I would have liked necessarily in the earlier weeks. And I know he was trying to build himself up and get up to speed, and he hadn't played many 90-minute games, but yesterday obviously he was very, very good. And yeah, those are my 4 players that I want to single out for praise: Saka, Partey, White and Merino. Also, Declan Rice as well. You know, Declan Rice, I have to give flowers to as well. I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm going to. Here you go, Declan. Here's a big virtual bouquet from me, because that was Declan Rice back to the Declan Rice that we saw last season. Playing in that midfield role, sitting that little bit deeper, controlling things, dominating things, using his ability to get around the pitch. Again, another one who looked a lot sharper and fitter than he has done in recent times. Brilliant, brilliant display from Declan Rice. And yeah, really, really pleased. Really, really pleased to see that. So, yeah, those are my players that I've singled out for praise. Right. Have you got any questions? Let's take a couple of questions before I say goodbye. Remember, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. Guys, we're nowhere near the 100 that I asked for. Come on. There's so many of you watching. There's no excuse for us not to have 100 likes on the board. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're new. A big thank you to everyone who subscribed recently, because the YouTube channel hit 37,000 subscribers just the other day. We're on the road towards 40k. Hopefully we can get there by the end of the season. Remember, if you haven't left us a review on Apple or Spotify, what are you playing at? Get on with it. Really helps. If you did leave us a review in the past, particularly on Apple, can you please try and do it again? If yours is still on there, it will just say review sent and it won't show up. But if it isn't, it will come through, because when we changed podcast platforms, we lost a hell of a lot of reviews. When I look on Chartable, we've got like 400, and when I look on Apple Podcasts, we've got like 150, which I can't figure out why. A load of them have disappeared. Really frustrating, but if you could help with that, I'd be super grateful. And check us out on Patreon if you want to support the pod and get access to additional content. You can do that by visiting patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. You can integrate our Patreon feed into your Apple Podcasts app, into your Spotify app, wherever it is that you listen to from regularly, or you can listen via the Patreon app, and you get access to our chat. You can chat to me directly, and yeah, we have lots of interesting conversations on there. So yeah, check it out. Right, let's go over to the live chat for your questions for the last 5 minutes or so of the show. Junior Gunner says, speak on Martinelli H. Have we moved past him? I did say this to my dad yesterday. On my way home, I called my dad and I said, what did you make of that? And he said, yeah, he was frustrated as well. When it comes to the Arsenal, he's quite an emotional guy. He's not emotional about anything else in life, like nothing. He's like a stone man. Or at least that's the perception that he gives. But when it comes to Arsenal, my God, does he wear his heart on his sleeve. And Martinelli was one of the players we discussed. Because we talked about the fact that, yes, he's got that running power and that relentless nature that causes defenders problems, that pins defenders back, etc., etc. But the issue with Gabriel Martinelli is that he doesn't always have the quality in those areas to make it count. And there was a period where we thought he did, but lately it's not been there. And people are blaming him for the equalising goal. And I don't think he's solely responsible. I already said it on the pod. I think that there are a number of people that you can look at and say, well, you didn't exactly cover yourself in glory in the lead up to that goal. But Martinelli needs to do better when he receives the ball in the final third. He needs to make more of that. And ultimately, we paid the price when Liverpool went down the other end and scored what was the equaliser. Do we need to move past him? I'd certainly be looking at someone. But the problem is, guys, it's very difficult to find someone with that running power and relentless drive that he does and the defensive work rate that also has the quality in the final third. If you find that player, they're probably the best winger in the world. But you should always strive to find that player. And I do think that Mikel would be well aware of that and will be looking at that. It's why he plays Martinelli over Trossard on the left at times, because he sees him as a real strong runner, a powerful force, an outlet. But he'll know full well that he doesn't always deliver the end product in the way that he needs to. Balance is key in the chat. Says, what's the main position you would strengthen in Jan? It's tough, isn't it? Because without the injuries, I'd be saying get another forward in, get another centre forward in. But with the injuries, you worry about other areas of the pitch and you start to think, well, do we need to now go out and bring in an additional player in the midfield or at the back line? Because right now we're struggling for fitness. I don't know. At this stage, I'm not sure. I want to see how the next few weeks pans out, because I've said that, there's no need to panic. We're only 5 points off the top. Man City have to come to Emirates Stadium. We've had much harder fixtures than them, etc., etc. The Liverpool lead is a little bit more significant to me, but at the same time, I don't rate them as much as I rate Manchester City. So maybe that cancels itself out a little bit. I don't know. But the thing is, you can say that now, but in 2 weeks' time, we've got Newcastle away next. We've got Chelsea away after that. In 2 weeks' time, if we don't take maximum points from those two games, or at least 4, an absolute minimum of 4, then I'm going to start to look at things and say, well, maybe we're a bit too far off the pace now. And I don't want to be saying that 10, 12 games into the league season. That would be really, really deflating. Again, I wouldn't say that we're completely out of it because of how many games there are remaining and because the fixtures will even themselves out, etc., etc. But I think we will end up looking back on this period and ruining the missed players because it's really had an impact on our performances. People will say, well, the squad should be deeper. I think the squad can always be better. I don't think there's a team in world football that look at their squad and say it's perfect. I think you can always strive for more in terms of the makeup of your squad, but it isn't always as simple as that. There are cost issues. There are issues around keeping players happy, etc., etc. So in terms of what I'd add, I think right now I'd tell you striker, but I want to see how the next few weeks pan out. Let's get through November. And then once we get into December, we can start to think about maybe what needs doing, what we need to do, who we need to add, who those individuals might be that are out there that we're looking at. But we'll see. Halo Mateus says, I couldn't help but notice the disappointment in Saka's face when he gave his interview after the match. Are Arsenal risking losing the quality of Saka and Saliba because of the lack of quality in the rest of the team? I don't think we're at that stage yet. But it is a stage that we could end up slipping into if we don't go on and win something, which is why I think this season is so bloody important. Look, I expect the players to be disappointed after the game yesterday. I expect them to be deflated after having led 2-1, given the circumstances around the game with some questionable decisions, etc., etc. I expect them to feel down in the dumps after conceding an 81st minute equalizer and failing to win a game that they should have won. But at the same time, I think time is a healer, and you will look back at this and you will start to think about the context. And the context is that we ended the game with a terrible backline, one that was always going to concede a goal. We're lucky it was just one, is what I would probably say 2-3 days down the line. The fact that we expect to win these games, it says a lot about where we've come. It says a lot about where we're at as a team, where we all believe that we're at. And it's easy to be emotional after a game and let your words flow and say things that are maybe a little bit overreactionary. But I think in time, you won't look at this as a good point necessarily, but you certainly won't look at it as a bad point. That's where I'm at today. And I think that position is only going to kind of strengthen itself in my own mind over the coming days. But hey, we are where we are. On to the next one. Okay, guys, I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner. A big thank you to every single one of you. Remember, leave a like on the YouTube video if you're watching us here. Remember to subscribe to the channel too. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever your preferred platform is. Leave us a review too. That really, really does help. I appreciate all your support, and a massive thank you to everyone that signed up to our Patreon page. If you haven't and you want to, if you want access to more content and to support me in bringing you this podcast podcast on a daily basis, pretty much, at least 6 out of 7 days a week, then please do go over to patreon.com/The Chronicles of a Gooner. You can hear my initial reaction to the 2-2 draw yesterday and our latest In Focus piece, which is on Ricardo Calafiori. Thank you as always. I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.